Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, I guess, depending on where you're dialing in from. Welcome. I think we're going to get started in about a minute or two, and we're going to have our guests. I see the numbers coming in, so we're going to give them a moment to get settled. And please bear with us, and we'll start in just a minute or two. I feel like I should work on my jokes right now. I think I just saw my father-in-law pop into the room. No, just kidding. We're gonna give it one more minute, and then we're gonna kick off. I think we're excited about the conversation today, and to chat a bit about the cookieless future and what it means as a publisher, and how publishers should be thinking about different solutions to help what will be a radical reinvention to this industry. So we'll kick off in a minute or two. I think we see the room filling up, and we're excited that you're joining us. Thank you. All right, well, I think we can get started, right, guys? Feeling good? Thumbs up?
Let's do this.
All right, game on. So thank you all for joining. I'm Matt Barash. I represent Zeotap. I think I'll be your guest host, if you will, today. And I'm excited to be joined by Stephane Pere, Chief Revenue Officer at Poool, and Gael Demessant from Prisma. Both gentlemen are joining me from Paris. I'm here in New York. We'll do a quick round of introductions before we jump into today's content. Here at Zeotap, I lead our global publishing and platform partnerships business. That means that I'm focused on helping to activate all of our data assets in the wild. And so that could be across the portfolio of publishers that we built across Europe to support our ID Plus initiative, as well as some of the efforts that we're building to enhance our CDP offering. And we're very excited, and I'm thrilled to be here today. So thanks so much for joining us.
Hello, I'm Gael Demessant. I'm in charge of the yield on programmatic for Prisma Media, a French publisher. I have all the ad tech problematic for Prisma. To you, Stephane.
Hey, hi, I'm Stephane. I joined Poool a year ago. I used to be on the publishing side. That's how I happened to know you, Matt. I remember our times in New York. It was a bit more than 10 years ago, I guess. And I'm in charge of sales and partnership with our key clients, such as Prisma.
Awesome. It's funny. Stephane and I met 10 years ago when we were competitors, and now we're sitting as partners. So it's good to see a familiar face. I think what we want to cover today is really, it's really a short agenda, but I think it's really packed with valuable content. And so when you think about where we are as an industry, and we're about 25 years into this, and you think about how the industry has run with relative continuity and very smoothly and with very little radical change, I think the most pronounced being the introduction of programmatic about 10 to 12 years ago. We've entered into a point in time where over the past 3 or 4 years, perhaps 5, there's been this thought about a reset and this concern around this balance between privacy and personalization. And at what point are consumers brought into that conversations as platforms become bigger and more important, as content becomes more accessible, and I think as the advertising business becomes bigger and bigger, and as their data is used in different ways. And so as we start to rethink this world where Google announced a couple of years ago that they were going to deprecate the third-party cookie, and that was scheduled to happen in February of next year, there was a lot to think about and a lot for publishers to consider, marketers to consider, and solutions to offer. And so I think what we're going to do today is we're going to cover off on who we each are and what our companies do and what they represent, what the value is that we bring. We're going to talk a little bit about a bit of a refresher, right? What are the challenges that everyone is facing in this industry, and what just happened with the announcement about 3 weeks ago that Google would delay that eventuality into 2023, which I think is probably a necessary reprieve for the industry. We're going to talk a little bit about registration and subscription and monetization tactics, and recognizing that value exchange is really important for how you take a visitor and you make them a user. We're also going to talk a little bit about ad monetization and why it's important that targeting without a cookie is still going to give the industry some sense of continuity. It just may look a little different. And then we're going to think ahead and say, what's next, right? What should we be thinking about? How do we play chess, right? How do we think 2 steps ahead? Maybe answer some questions, and we'll see where we go from there. So I think with that, let's launch in. So who are we? Gael, you're up first.
Yes, thank you, Matt. Who is Prisma Media? Prisma Media is the first publisher in France for B-media, print plus digital, as you can see with this number. 80% of French people reads at least one magazine or one website from Prisma. We focus on verticals like news, entertainment, people, premium, and with brands such as Gala, Capital, Femme Actuelle, or Geo. One major characteristic for Prisma in digital is the very strong part of programmatic. We only have 10% of direct sales. So programmatic is very, very important for us. Programmatic is driven by KPI, and identification, for example, will be one of the most important KPI in the future, as it's the case already for viewability, for example. Therefore, it will be very important to increase for publishers the pool of emails, and registration could be a solution to do this. Thank you, Matt. And Stephane, I think it's for you.
Yeah, let me switch there. So we are Poool. We are a marketing technology, and at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is helping publishers and any content creator turn their audience into business. And we started the journey mostly, helping publishers convert free visitors into paid subscribers. But over time, we started also to tackle other issues and therefore opportunities, such as how do you help publishers convert a volatile audience into a more engaged and more frequent audience, for example. And how do you convert also an anonymous audience into an identified and addressable audience? That's why what we offer today is a bunch of different walls, right? Pay wall, registration wall, data wall, advertising wall, different ways to allow publishers to let readers give something in exchange of access to content. So which means that we've been historically working with publication, traditional publication, if I may say, in the newspapers, magazine space, but over time, we've been working more and more with digital natives that don't have a subscription business, but they still care about making sure their audience can be properly monetized with advertising. And I think that's going to be a bit of the focus here. So we have this marketing wall solution, and we're also about to launch a subscription offer for digital publication. Matt.
That's great. It's funny because I'm an advertising guy, but I find the subscription business to be so fascinating, and that's why I love what you guys do, and that's why I love what you guys are doing at Prisma, because it's really about trying to find this balance. And at Zeotap, we are data experts, if you will. The company was born in Berlin, and we're focused on really servicing marketers, agencies, brands and publishers, as well as the ad tech ecosystem across the big 5 markets in Europe. That could be in UK, Germany, France, Spain, Italy. We also have a presence in India. We really have 3 core capabilities at Zeotap. The first being a CDP. That is a solution that we provide to some of the leading brands globally, whether that be P&G, it could be Mercedes, it could be Amazon, it could be Virgin Mobile, but they're great partners of ours. And then when we think about their data and we think about their first-party data assets and how valuable that is, it needs to be more actionable. And so our business has really been this evolution where we started as targeted segments, and then we built a CDP, and now we're very focused on identity resolution for a world where perhaps the cookie goes away in 2 years, 3 years, and ultimately brands and their consumers need to be able to connect in a way where there is value, and that value is created for the publisher. And so we are in many ways I think a vendor that sits in between a publisher and a partner like Prisma and a partner like Poool. And so, we value those relationships greatly. And I think we're building an ecosystem where we can really enable data to be actioned really anywhere across the digital economy. So when I think about what we're doing today that's really relevant to, to the conversation, it's really about initiative that we launched a little over a year ago called ID+, and it's a universal identity solution. It's really meant to drive continuity for addressable market in a world where, and yes, I'm in an office, in a world where, I think there's going to be a very different addressable hierarchy. And the most valuable data set that will exist will be the relationship between the logged in user, the consumer, and ultimately the marketer, as I've explained. And so when you look at how, the value of identity, the currency by which identity will run, that will be the hashed email address. And so, there are publishers today who are, they're really thinking through, how can we build a stronger relationship with our consumer? How do we take that consumer where the publisher for the past 10 years has been so reliant on audience development through search and social for that opportunistic visit from the user? And how do we build that consistent loyalty, that engagement? And a lot of that is driven through value exchange. And I think I'll let my friends here talk and speak in greater detail about that. But ultimately, the advertising component of that can be powered through universal identity. And so we are really, really excited about the opportunity. We think that Europe is a really unique market where, because of the concerns around privacy, because of the need for personalization, we believe that publishers will be aggressive and be interested in finding innovative solutions, and that they will benefit because the value of the relationship that they have with the user and what that will mean to the marketer and the advertiser will be enhanced by using a universal identifier that has a high fidelity of signal. So a couple of weeks ago, Google made a big announcement. And what they announced was, I think depending on who you speak with, most people would suggest a huge sigh of relief. Over the past year or so, perhaps year and a half, the industry has been scrambling, right? They've been scrambling to figure out this patchwork privacy solution where you have to think about addressable targetable media, you've got to think about measurement, you've got to think about attribution if you're a marketer, and you've got to figure out, hey, I've run a business off a third-party cookie historically, and it's really been a one-stop shop. It's really been easy. And now all of a sudden, with the introduction or the deprecation of the third-party cookie and the introduction of a new ecosystem, Google was radically reinventing an industry. Except that's a really complex undertaking. And what that means is that you've got to get buy-in from any number of different constituencies. So whether that be publisher buy-in, marketer buy-in, agency buy-in, vendor and ad tech buy-in, there was a lot of work to be done. And I think what Google was trying to do with the deprecation of the cookie was absolutely put consumer privacy at the forefront of everyone's priority list. I think there's no doubt about it that consumer privacy is something that really has to be worked on and enhanced. And so we're at this moment in time where, as an industry, we recognize that there's a really important moment here, but it's got to be done right. And I think that Google was taking this opportunity to push an agenda, but at the same time, it felt a little bit rushed. And so whether you're a marketer or a publisher, you were trying to get things tested, but at the same time, in a world where the industry has been able to grow and scale because of things like standards, the standards weren't set and the deadline was looming large. It was approaching very quickly. And so roughly 3-4 weeks ago, Google pushed back that deadline to about 2 years to roughly the end of 2023. And I think everyone took this great sigh of relief. But I think there's a massive question out there, which is, what does that mean for a publisher, a marketer, an agency with respect to how they are going to forge forward? And are they going to really get aggressive with their testing? Are they going to pause? Are they going to wait? Are they going to see? Is there going to be legislation that's introduced? There are any number of unknown variables. And I think we're excited to see where that falls out. We're pretty excited to see people start to test more aggressively, but also look at what that means for the industry. And part of what's important here is the need for publishers to have great tools for that relationship, that engaged user, that loyalty. And so, I'll let you guys chat a little bit about, how you partner and work together on registration, subscription, monetization, and tactics such as those.
Sure, and we just published a little poll for you guys to let us know how do you feel about this new delay with Google announcement, to see if you guys plan to accelerate, keep going as usual, or put your initiatives on pause. That would be interesting if you can answer. I guess we just want to talk a bit about registration and subscription. Sometimes people think it's registration or subscription. What's interesting to see is, if we look at the number, I show you a little slide here, is, as I mentioned to you, we started a journey helping traditional media better monetize their audience through subscription. But what we've seen over time, there is a direct correlation between engagement and conversion. So what's interesting here, we can see that someone coming once a month has a conversion rate in average of 0.05% for that cohort. And that's a challenge, because normally, depending on publication and media owners, this cohort is like 60, 70, 80% of the audience. So the most of the audience is very unlikely to convert for subscription. And once you go upper in the engagement metrics, you see that when folks come over 15 times a month and they register to use later, which is an amazing opportunity to re-engage and form habits, they move from a 0.05 to a 0.6%. So that's the average we've seen across our different partners here. And when they go to the next step, which is becoming a registered user, having an account with some benefits, the conversion is way higher than the average one. So that's how we started to realize that if you want to have a hard conversion strategy, you need to have in place anyway a soft conversion strategy, because that's the way you're going to get to the subscription. And that's why we always recommend for publishers that are thinking about launching a subscription, not to launch directly, but make sure they build up on the soft conversion, that they have a pool of addressable audience that then they can sell subscription to. But the good thing with this strategy is having a soft conversion strategy is very strong just for the advertising strategy anyway. So it's good for advertising business, because, and we're going to talk about this with Gael a bit more, but having people with emails, identifiers, is going to allow you to better monetize your advertising revenue, or drive it further. So the problem is, you want to start to have a registration strategy, but what will be the impact on the short-term advertising monetization? That's the problem. So I wanted to show you that there are ways where you can test softly the reaction. So that's just an example, and maybe Madeleine, you can play this little thingy here. Is you can decide maybe to target all users on a publication, and maybe you want to test a registration, and you want to be okay. Maybe for the first article when they come in, they will see no message. So you monetize 100% of the people coming from the first article they consume, which is good for the volatile, for example. And then if they consume maybe another article, so first article, no message. And if they go to a second article, I will push a newsletter, right? I will ask this. And you can, put that journey. But what's interesting is not to put it for all users. What's interesting is to maybe keep doing what you do today, which is letting people consume your content because you don't have subscription. And you will allow the rest of the audience to be able to browse all your content. And suddenly you could have, 2 journeys that you want to put live, and then you can decide the exposure. And maybe you just want to be 6% because you're afraid of the bounce rate. So that's just an example about how you can go about it, because what's important is you need to monitor your new soft conversion, but at the same time, you need to see the impact on bounce rate, on returning visits, and find the right balance between the gain you're having with registration and the loss you're having maybe on the short term with your straightforward advertising. And then you can maybe decide, say, it's not a percentage of all users, it might be just on my fan base. That's the lowest part, but I know they are in market with me. So I'm going to be able to test something just with my fans, for example. That was just a little illustration about the way to go about it. Don't go straight, test, expose a little percent of your audience, and then you can scale up. But I guess, Gael, you might be able to share with us, your approach and what you've been looking at.
Exactly, Stephane. First of all, what is the context for Prisma Media? As we have some tabloid or TV guides, it's very hard to put in place a paywall for every website. So we are late for subscription versus other publishers in France. At the opposite, registration is already well integrated in Prisma Media, thanks to Prisma Connect, our own single sign-on. It allows us to get a lot of email for personalization, services, or monetization. To develop subscription for premium brands capital, we have made a test with Poool, initially with a data wall, and we made a lot of tests during 1 year last year, and we decided to come to a paywall this year for capital. So we think it's very important to make a lot of tests to succeed and to develop his own strategy. To define this best strategy, it's very important to keep in mind what could we be provided by registration and subscription. In this slide, you see for Prisma Media, for example, we have the advertising brings an average of 15 cents by user and by month. And some big users are close to 2 euros. So it's very important to keep in mind what we can win with this strategy subscription and what we can lose. About emails, we can see this year we have an uplift that it begins to bring an uplift for monetization, and it was not the case last year. Okay, we see that identifiers, direct connection with emails, begin to have an incremental for the eCPM, and we forecast that in the next years we will have another increase and growth for the eCPM. So it's very important for a publisher to increase emails recruitment with registration, for example.
I think that's I think that's a great analysis. I think that it's very much a balancing act, right? And there's a fine line between, recognizing how you leave one model and or another without sacrifice. And, it sounds like you guys are doing it quite effectively. Let's launch into advertising monetization for a second here. Because, I think we've got a vastly different world coming where, I think when I look at the results from the poll that we just ran about, Google's recent announcement and what the plans mean, and I look at the results, two-thirds of people polled, or two-thirds of people who answered, said they plan to accelerate their testing and their plans, which is great, right? Because I think one of the things that one of the lessons that should have been learned from the introduction of GDPR was that, I think the longer you wait, the tougher it becomes. And so by getting ahead of the problem and, not sweeping it under the rug, I think there's this moment and this opportunity to really have a better grasp on what this will all mean and what the benefit will be. And so, ad monetization is a real thing. And, I think it's such an important part of the economics of just keeping the open web free and available, right? I mean, Gael, I think you guys are, you have no problem running a subscription business. I think that's the DNA of the business in many respects. But at the same time, you look at advertising and this is still such a core part of what your future looks like, right?
Thank you, Matt. We are speaking about cookieless in the future, but a world without cookie third is already exists. When you are with browsers like Safari and Firefox, currently we lose 50% of our eCPM in programmatic. Okay, so it's already a huge issue for publisher. A world without any cookies exists also. It's when you have any consent, don't have any consent, and in this case we lose 80% of our eCPM in programmatic. So our publisher can react to avoid this issue. We think, first of all, that consents are essential for services or monetization. So to maximize consent, we have put in place a cookie wall, and you can see it in the slide just below, thanks to our CMP's source point. And a visitor with this cookie wall have only both alternatives. One, either you accept consent, in this case, you can access freely in your website if you accept. Second point, if you don't want to accept consent, in this case, you must pay to access our website without any ads. With this cookie wall, we have optimized consent rates, and we don't have to sell without consent. So it is very important for advertising. About the third-party cookies, their end is not only a risk for the publisher, but also an opportunity. We can have more direct connection to the buy side, and we can recover eCPM on Safari browser with a strategy based on identifiers or first-party cookie. For Prisma Media, for example, we have implemented the main identifiers in the market, like Zeotap ID+, LiveRamp or ID5. And we begin to see some first results, and they are very, very interesting. It's okay for me, Matt.
That's great. I think we're excited to see what those results look like on those initial tests. I think, this is like a complete reinvention, right? We're literally starting from scratch when we look at this. And so those pilots working with agencies, with marketers and connecting them to Prisma and, the initiative that you're taking is actually really admirable. And we appreciate that because these aren't just learnings for the publisher or the marketer. These are learnings for the industry. And I think that's really important to focus on. So which should the next moves be? I mean, I mentioned this was like a little bit of a chess match, right? In terms of, I think the publisher, the marketer, and maybe, perhaps the walled gardens. And, and it's complex and it's challenging, and there isn't a playbook and there isn't precedent. And so I think, from your perspective, guys, what does it mean, right? What should the next, kind of key strategic initiatives be if you're a publisher and you're thinking about subscription, you're thinking about registration, you're thinking about ad monetization? What do you think are, some of the first steps that publishers should consider, or the most important steps that they should consider?
I think publishers must be prepared to all options. From one part, to be compliant to Google on GAFA, and in the same time to build an alternative to Google's privacy sandbox, for example. And I think it's very important. For Prisma Media, currently, header bidding represents more than half of our incomes. Okay. And when we began the programmatic, Google were I think 80% of our incomes. So it's very important to have to be on one choice on another one. And with in header bidding with all the SSP, we are developing our first party data and we deploy identifiers. I think that for a publisher, better identification is very, very important to have to continue monetization without any cookie, third-party cookie. But we have also another opportunity for a publisher. It could be interesting to be the next data providers, for example, in the next years, because without third-party cookie, publisher will be, I think, incontournable. I don't know the word in English, but I think it will be very important for publisher. So we will need to be agile, have the technical capacities to manage DMP, identifier, on all the ad tech we will have to manage in the future.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think agility is key, right? I think it's about test, it's about innovate, it's about find success, find failure, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and keep testing different things, right? And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what those findings mean, because again, it's been very, very easy, historically, relatively speaking, to run a digital business. I think the industry has become more complex with different players in different ways to monetize. But ultimately, the third-party cookie has been a bit like a drug, and the industry has been stuck on that drug for a long time. And so, now it's time to get off of the drug and to think about things in a very healthy way, if you will, and a way that benefits the consumer. So, sorry, go ahead.
Matt, but yeah, I was thinking, I think it's an opportunity to, beyond the techniques and the monetization, to also, as you described, both of you, focus on the consumers and the readers and their relationship to content. Because what's interesting is we as a business are trying to get identifiers, right? Because once you get identifiers, you can do different things. The first thing, you better monetize through advertising. That's great, sums up. Once you get identifiers, normally it means you get email or some other kind of contact info. And that means suddenly you can you push your audience to become actionable in your marketing ecosystem. So that's a very strong benefit. But what's nice also is having this strategy is to get this identifier. You need people to create an account, to register to newsletters. And once you do so, finally they engage more with your brand, with your content. So that's really create a very positive circle. And one thing I will urge people to consider is have a relentless focus on what is the benefit for the reader. Because we know the benefit for the business, absolutely, advertising, marketing activation, but what is the benefit for the reader? So make sure that to create an account, you got special perks for the readers. Save an article, get access to special content, have access to many other things, a dark mode, whatever, right? But really think about different perks so that the experience is better for the reader. And suddenly it's good because you're going to maximize the percent of the audience that you turn into identified, through this relationship, and then you can better monetize through advertising, could be dedicated merchandise, any other things, and subscription. So I guess that's where the two come together.
Yes, all is linked, personalization, monetization services, and I think it's a good point.
Yeah, no, it's great, and it's not going to be the same for any two publishers, right? I think it's going to be very much a custom, personalized, bespoke setup, right? Where I think publishers will find different ways to connect with with those users, and I think you're seeing it now in the mobile environment, in the app space, where app developers with the introduction of iOS 14.5 have had to find interesting different ways to connect with the consumer to get them to consent and allow tracking. And I think, this is an extension of that. And I think there's a far greater opportunity with, with services and partners like Poool to really enable more of a dynamic experience to get in front of the consumer, to try to attract that email address and really that registration or that subscription, because ultimately, I think the revenue and the ARPU that comes along with, with that connection is going to be, far lucrative. But also, I think from my perspective, when I take off my ad tech hat and I put on my consumer hat, it's really important to me that people and consumers have access to great content. And that, those publishers who are creating great content have the ability to continue to operate freely, continue to operate at the level of, of great journalism or great, production that they've offered historically. But also they deserve to be compensated for that in some way. And so, historically, if that's been in the form of data and advertising, that's one model. But I think it's, it's really truly this moment where we need to recognize that connection and that relationship that we have as consumers needs to be upheld in some way. And whether that's, just by typing an email address to get access or by paying some small fee for content, it's all worth it. So moving right along, let's get to the last section here, which is Q&A. We're running a little bit long. I think there might be some questions from, from some of the folks in the audience. I might have some questions for you guys. I think this is the interactive part of today's show, if you will. And if anyone has questions, we encourage you to pop them into the box. I think it's relatively simple. We're happy to chat a little bit. Otherwise, we can start to wrap up. Any thoughts from you guys while we wait?
I was just trying to look at the answers of the latest poll, because it's interesting to see when we were asking about, whether the attendees have a registration or a subscription strategy, neither or both. It seems that close to 2/3 have both, so registration and subscription, and the other third is registration only. So I guess that's kind of interesting. And then there are some question about do publishers, employ a first-party data or an ID strategy? Neither or both, same, right? And it seems to be that it's a 50% ID and 50% doing both. So clearly, the folks attending this conversation are pretty focused, which is good.
I think it's very interesting for a publisher to make both, because one is not sufficient. On first-party cookie is very interesting for a publisher for this for the monetization.
Yeah, for sure. I think again, there's no right or wrong answer here. I think the question just becomes action, and and when. And I think as we wind down the conversation today, I think the important takeaway here, coming out of the Google announcement, a month ago, and all these changes, is that I think the challenge for all of us, whether you're sitting at Poool, you're sitting at Prisma, you're sitting at Zeotap, or you're sitting at Google, is that the change is coming, right? That hasn't changed. I think that, you know, the industry is going to move towards a more privacy-first, transparent operating system. And, you know, with that, I think that's good for everyone. You know, I think it's good for everyone if they take smart strategic steps. The only thing that has changed is the deadline. And so, you know, what you opt to do with that, if you're a marketer, if you're a publisher, is really up to you. But, you know, I think if you were asking me, and I've been a publisher, and that's where Stephane and I met once upon a time, you know, I would use that 1.5 to 2 year extension to my advantage and really start to think about getting more aggressive with my testing, thinking about, you know, how to really be innovative, and looking at evaluating all of the solutions that come my way, because you never know what the next big thing will be. And so I think it's safe to say that subscription is a key part of, you know, a publisher's go forward plan. Registration is a relative certainty for a publisher going forward, and ad monetization isn't going away anytime soon. And so, you know, I think having the right tools in place, the right partners in place, the right vendors in place, the right solutions in place, but also having the right action plan is really, you know, it's really kind of the message that I think we all share as we put this, you know, end this conversation and say goodbye. And so I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. Any final words? Au revoir, guys. You want to say it better than I do?
No, it's okay for me.
À bientôt, Matt. Hein?
Thank you.
See you this weekend
exactly
if you come to Paris.
Said.
Right? Anyway.
Very good, guys. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for joining us.
And reach out to us for any individual questions.
Nice day.
Merci, Gael. Au revoir.